The stars stretched endlessly outside the large windows of the US Invincible Asterisk, a warship built for one purpose: to protect Earth. Inside, the hum of machines and the quiet murmur of voices filled the air. Captain Daniel Harper stood on the bridge, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared at the glowing display screen in front of him. The ship was approaching the edge of the Syrian sector, an area known for its dangers, but also its importance to Earth's survival. The crew moved around him with practiced ease. Some checked their stations while others talked quietly about what lay ahead. Everyone knew this mission wasn't just another routine patrol. Rumors had spread across the fleet: strange sightings, ships disappearing without a trace, and whispers of something lurking in the dark corners of space. No one wanted to admit it, but fear lingered in the air like a shadow. Lieutenant Emily Carter sat at her station near the front of the bridge. She was young but sharp, her fingers moving quickly over the controls as she scanned the region ahead. Her eyes narrowed when the sensors picked up something unusual, a faint energy spike that didn't match any known signature. For a moment, she hesitated, wondering if it was just interference or something more serious. But before she could say anything, the readings vanished. "Anything worth reporting?" Captain Harper asked, his voice calm but firm. Emily glanced up, shaking her head slightly. "Just some background noise, sir. Nothing to worry about." Harper nodded but didn't look convinced. He trusted Emily's instincts, but he also knew better than to ignore even the smallest detail out here. Space was vast and unpredictable, and danger often came without warning. At the back of the bridge, Ensign Jacob Riley tried to focus on his duties. This was his first major assignment after graduating from the academy, and he felt the weight of expectations pressing down on him. Everything seemed so much harder than he'd imagined. The constant beeping of consoles, the endless stream of data flowing across screens, and the pressure of knowing that lives depended on his work. He adjusted his uniform nervously, hoping no one noticed how out of place he felt. Sergeant Rachel Moore walked onto the bridge, her boots clicking against the metal floor. She was tall and strong, with a no-nonsense attitude that earned her respect from everyone on board. Her gaze swept across the room, taking in the tension hanging over the crew. She stopped beside Emily and leaned in close enough to speak softly. "You okay?" she asked. Emily gave a quick nod. "I'm fine. Just keeping an eye on things." Rachel studied her for a moment longer before straightening up. "Good. We'll need you sharp out here." As the minutes passed, the ship continued its journey deeper into the sector. The view outside grew darker, the stars fewer and farther between. It was almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the unease building inside the Invincible Asterisk. But peace in space rarely lasted long. Captain Harper turned to face his crew, his expression unreadable. "Listen up," he said, his voice cutting through the low buzz of activity. "We don't know what's waiting for us out there, but we're ready. Stay alert, trust each other, and remember why we're here: to keep Earth safe." His word hung in the air, a reminder of the responsibility they all carried. As the Invincible Asterisk pushed forward, no one spoke. The silence was heavy, filled with thoughts of what might lie ahead. None of them realized yet just how much this mission would test their courage and change them forever. The US Invincible Asterisk drifted through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it moved deeper into the Syrian sector. The crew worked in silence, their eyes glued to their screens, scanning for anything unusual. Captain Daniel Harper stood near the center of the bridge, his arms crossed as he watched the sensor readings intently. So far, everything seemed quiet, too quiet. Suddenly, Lieutenant Emily Carter leaned forward in her seat, her brow furrowed. "Captain," she said, her voice steady but tinged with curiosity, "there's something ahead. A large object, not moving." Harper stepped closer to her station, peering at the screen. Sure enough, a faint blip appeared on the radar, a massive shape floating lifelessly in the void. "Can you get a visual?" he asked. Emily tapped a few commands, and moments later, An image flickered onto the main display. It was a derelict alien ship, its surface scarred by time and damage. The vessel looked ancient, its jagged edges and strange markings unlike anything human engineers had ever built. The sight sent a ripple of unease through the bridge. "What is that thing?" Ensign Jacob Riley whispered under his breath, unable to take his eyes off the screen. He wasn't the only one unsettled by the discovery. Even Sergeant Rachel Moore, who rarely showed emotion, stared at the alien craft with narrowed eyes. "We need to check it out," Captain Harper said finally, breaking the silence. "Lieutenant Bennett, gather a team. I want answers." Ryan Bennett, the ship's science officer, nodded and quickly assembled a small group. Alongside him went Sergeant Moore, 2 Marines, and Dr. Laura Simmons, the ship's xenobiologist. They boarded a shuttlecraft and made their way toward the mysterious vessel, leaving the Invincible Asterisk behind. As they approached, the alien ship loomed larger, its eerie stillness unnerving. The shuttle docked with a hiss, and the boarding party stepped inside cautiously. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing twisted metal walls covered in strange symbols. The air was cold and stale, carrying an odd metallic smell. "This place gives me the creeps," one of the Marines muttered, gripping his weapon tightly. Dr. Simmons ignored the comment, her attention fixed on the symbols. She ran her gloved hand over them, studying their intricate patterns. "These aren't just decorations," she murmured. "There's some kind of language, or maybe a warning." Sergeant Moore signaled for everyone to stay alert. "Keep your eyes open," she ordered. "We don't know what we're dealing with here." They moved deeper into the ship, their footsteps echoing eerily in the empty corridors. In one room, they found evidence of chaos: broken equipment, scorch marks, and dark stains that might have been blood. But there were no bodies, no signs of survivors or attackers. Whatever had happened here, it had left behind only destruction. Then they heard it, a faint, repeating sound. It was barely audible at first, like static crackling in the distance. As they followed the noise, it grew clearer, forming words in an alien tongue. Lieutenant Bennett activated a translator device, and after a moment, the message became clear. "Warning, danger, flee." The group exchanged uneasy glances. Before anyone could speak, the lights on their helmets flickered, and the temperature dropped sharply. Something wasn't right. Sergeant Moore tightened her grip on her weapon, her instincts screaming that they weren't alone. "We need to leave now," she said firmly, turning toward the exit. But as they retraced their steps, the ship seemed to change around them. Corridors that had been empty moments ago now felt crowded, as if unseen eyes were watching. Every shadow seemed to shift, every sound amplified. The message played again, louder this time, almost frantic. "Flee, flee." Without hesitation, the team raced back to the shuttle, their hearts pounding. Once aboard, they sealed the hatch and prepared for departure. As the shuttle pulled away from the alien ship, Dr. Simmons turned to look back, her face pale. "Whatever destroyed that ship," she said quietly, "it's still out there." Back on the U.S. Invincible Asterisk, Captain Harper listened to their report with growing concern. The crew braced themselves for what might come next, unaware that their journey had only just begun. Back aboard the U.S. Invincible Asterisk, the mood was tense. The boarding team stood in the briefing room, their faces pale and their voices low as they recounted what they had seen inside the alien ship. Dr. Laura Simmons held a datapad, her hands trembling slightly as she replayed the strange message they had recorded. "It's a warning," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "They were trying to tell us something before it was too late." Captain Daniel Harper listened carefully, his expression unreadable. He leaned forward on the table, resting his weight on his arms. "What do you think destroyed them?" he asked, looking directly at Lieutenant Ryan Bennett. Bennett hesitated, glancing at the others before answering. "I don't know for sure, sir, but based on the damage we saw, scorch marks, missing sections of the hull, It wasn't natural. It looked like an attack. An attack by what? Emily Carter interrupted from her seat near the wall. Her sharp tone betrayed her frustration. She hated mysteries, especially ones that put the crew in danger. Dr. Simmons cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. The symbols I studied, they mentioned machines, self-replicating machines. If I'm reading this correctly, the aliens may have created them, but the machines turned against their creators. They wiped out everything in their path. A heavy silence fell over the room. The idea of intelligent machines capable of such destruction sent chills down everyone's spines. Ensign Jacob Riley shifted uncomfortably in his chair, feeling out of his depth. He couldn't shake the image of those dark stains on the alien ship's floor, or the way the air had felt so cold and wrong. "We need to decide our next move," Captain Harper said finally, breaking the quiet. "Do we stay and investigate further, or do we leave while we still can?" Sergeant Rachel Moore spoke up immediately. "We should go. That ship is a death trap. Whatever destroyed it might still be nearby." Lieutenant Bennett nodded in agreement. "She's right, sir. We don't have enough information to fight whatever's out there. We'd be walking into a disaster blind." But Emily Carter wasn't convinced. "And if it comes after us? What if it follows us back to Earth? We can't just run away without knowing more." Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, each person weighing the risks. Before anyone could argue further, the ship shuddered violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared across the asterisk, invincible asterisk, red lights flashing urgently. "What was that?" Harper demanded, already moving toward the door. "It's coming from outside," Jacob called out, rushing to his station on the bridge. His fingers flew over the controls as he tried to make sense of the readings. Multiple contacts closing in fast. The captain arrived moments later, his eyes scanning the screens. Dozens of small objects filled the space around them, moving erratically but with purpose. They weren't ships, not like anything the crew had ever seen. They were sleek, metallic drones, glowing faintly with eerie blue light. "They're surrounding us," Emily reported, her voice tight with worry. "Hundreds of them." Harper clenched his jaw, his mind racing. "Raise shields. Arm weapons. Prepare for evasive maneuvers." The crew sprang into action, their earlier debate forgotten. The drones began firing, sending bursts of energy slamming into the Invincible's asterisk shields. Sparks flew from consoles as the impacts rocked the ship. Sergeant Moore barked orders to her Marines, readying them in case the drones breached the hull. On the bridge, Jacob struggled to keep up with the chaos. His heart pounded as he relayed updates to Captain Harper. "Shields are holding, for now, but they're targeting specific areas. If they break through, we'll deal with that when it happens," Harper cut in sharply. Despite the situation, his calm demeanor steadied the crew. Focus on staying alive. As the battle raged on, Dr. Simmons watched the drones on the main screen, her mind working furiously. These weren't random attackers. They were organized, relentless. And if her translation was correct, they wouldn't stop until every living thing aboard the Invincible asterisk was gone. For the first time since joining the mission, Jacob realized how fragile their position truly was. Out here, in the vast emptiness of space, help was millions of miles away. They were completely alone and completely outnumbered. The U.S. Invincible trembled under the relentless assault of the drones. Bright flashes of light lit up the darkness outside as energy blasts slammed into the ship's shields. On the bridge, Lieutenant Emily Carter gripped her console tightly, her knuckles white as she monitored the shield levels. "Shields at 60% and dropping," she called out, her voice strained but clear. "They're hitting us hard." Captain Daniel Harper stood near the center of the room, his eyes fixed on the main screen. The swarm of drones surrounded the ship like a cloud of angry insects, their glowing blue lights pulsing ominously. He knew they couldn't keep this up for long. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Don't let them pin us down." Jacob Riley worked frantically at his station, plotting a course to avoid the worst of the attacks. His hands moved quickly over the controls, sweat beading on his forehead. For once, no one questioned his inexperience. They needed all the help they could get. The ship banked sharply to one side, narrowly dodging a concentrated volley of fire. Sparks flew from nearby panels as stray energy bolts breached the weakened shields. "Damage report," Harper barked. "Minor hull breaches in sections 3 and 7, Jacob replied, reading off the damage alerts. "Engineering teams are already responding." Sergeant Rachel Moore's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got drones trying to breach the outer decks," she reported. "My team is holding them off. But we can't keep this up forever." Harper nodded grimly. "Understood. Hold your position." Turning to Emily, he added, "How long until the shields fail?" "At this rate, 5 minutes, maybe less," she answered without hesitation. Her tone was calm, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Lieutenant Ryan Bennett leaned closer to Dr. Laura Simmons, who was studying the drone's movements on another screen. "Is there any pattern to their attacks?" he asked urgently. "Anything we can exploit?" Simmons shook her head. "They're too unpredictable. But," she paused, squinting at the data, "there might be a central node controlling them. If we can locate it, we might be able to disrupt their coordination." Harper's gaze snapped to her. "Can you find it?" "I'll try," she said, already typing commands into her console. The screen flickered as she analyzed the swarm's behavior. Lines of code scrolled past, searching for anomalies in the drone's formation. Meanwhile, the battle intensified. Explosions rocked the ship as more drones pressed their attack. Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle shouted orders from the engine room, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "Divert auxiliary power to the shields," he yelled. "We're losing structural integrity." On the bridge, Jacob flinched as another blast rattled the ship. A shard of metal fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing his head. Captain Harper remained steady, his focus unshaken. "Emily, target their weakest points. Hit them where it hurts." Emily didn't hesitate. Her fingers danced across the weapons console, launching a barrage of missiles at the nearest cluster of drones. Several exploded in bright bursts of light, temporarily thinning the swarm. "Direct hits," she announced, allowing herself a small smile. But it wasn't enough. The remaining drones regrouped almost instantly, filling the gaps left by their destroyed comrades. Dr. Simmons suddenly gasped, pointing at her screen. "I found it. There's a larger drone at the edge of the swarm. It's emitting a signal. That has to be the control node." Harper didn't waste a second. "Emily, lock onto that target. Prioritize it above everything else." "I'm on it," Emily replied, her voice sharp with determination. She adjusted the targeting system, aiming the ship's most powerful weapon at the central drone. The crew held their breath as the countdown began. Just as the shot fired, a fresh wave of attackers surged forward, battering the shields even harder. The missile struck true, obliterating the central drone in a blinding explosion. For a moment, the swarm faltered, their movements becoming sluggish and disorganized. It was the break the Invincible needed. "Now's our chance," Harper shouted. "Push them back." The crew rallied, firing everything they had at the confused drones. One by one, the attackers were destroyed, their glowing lights fading into the void. By the time the last drone exploded, the Invincible was battered but still intact. As the alarms quieted and the ship steadied, the crew exchanged weary glances. They had survived, for now. But none of them doubted that the real fight was far from over. The U.S. Invincible floated in silence, its battered hull a testament to the fierce battle it had just endured. Smoke lingered in the corridors, and the faint smell of burnt metal filled the air. The crew worked tirelessly to repair the damage, their faces pale with exhaustion but determined. On the bridge, Captain Daniel Harper stood by the main screen, staring out at the emptiness of space where the swarm of drones had once been. For now, the immediate threat was gone, but he knew better than to relax. Dr. Laura Simmons sat at her station, reviewing the data she had collected during the fight. Her fingers moved quickly over her console, piecing together fragments of information about the drones. She frowned as patterns began to emerge, patterns that painted a grim picture. "Captain," she said finally, looking up from her work, "these drones weren't just random attackers. They're part of something much bigger." Harper turned to face her, his expression serious. "Explain." Simmons hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "They're remnants of an ancient civilization. From what I've decoded, this species created the drones as tools to mine resources, explore space, maybe even defend themselves. But something went wrong. The drones evolved beyond their control, turning on their creators and wiping them out completely." Lieutenant Ryan Bennett leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "You're saying we just fought machines that destroyed an entire race?" Simmons nodded. "Yes. And if they're still active after all this time, it means they haven't stopped. They'll keep spreading, consuming everything in their path." A heavy silence settled over the room. The weight of her words hung in the air, leaving everyone lost in thought. Ensign Jacob Riley shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at the others. He felt small and insignificant compared to the scale of what they were facing. If these drones could destroy an advanced alien civilization, what chance did humanity have? "We can't let them reach Earth," Emily Carter said firmly, breaking the quiet. Her hands rested on her weapons console, her voice steady despite the tension. "If they follow us back, it's over." Sergeant Rachel Moore crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "Then we destroy them here, end it before it starts." Captain Harper rubbed his temples, thinking deeply. Destroying the drones sounded simple enough, but the risks were enormous. The crew had barely survived one encounter. How could they hope to defeat an entire army of self-replicating machines? Yet retreating wasn't an option either. Leaving the drones unchecked would only delay the inevitable. "What about the central node?" Lieutenant Bennett asked suddenly, turning to Simmons. "Could we use that against them? Maybe find a way to shut them down permanently?" Simmons considered the question for a moment. "It's possible. If we locate the source of their programming, the original command structure, we might be able to disable them en masse. But getting close enough to do that..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "It would be suicide." "We don't have a choice," Harper said quietly, his voice cutting through the room. All eyes turned to him. "If there's even a chance we can stop them, we have to take it. Earth depends on us." The crew exchanged uneasy glances. No one spoke, but the unspoken agreement was clear. They would see this through, no matter the cost. As the discussion continued, Jacob noticed something odd on his sensor readings. A faint energy signature pulsed in the distance, almost too weak to detect. He zoomed in, trying to make sense of it. Captain," he said hesitantly, drawing everyone's attention. "There's something out there. It's faint, but it's moving toward us." Harper stepped closer, studying the display. The signature was unlike anything they'd seen before, neither human nor drone. Whatever it was big. "Can you identify it?" he asked. Jacob shook his head. "Not yet, but it's gaining speed." The bridge fell silent again, the crew bracing themselves for whatever new danger approached. The Invincible had survived one attack, but none of them believed their troubles were over. In the vastness of space, every shadow hid a potential threat, and they were running out of time to prepare. The faint energy signature grew stronger with each passing minute, its presence looming like a storm on the horizon. On the bridge of the asterisk U.S. Invincible asterisk, tension crackled in the air as the crew prepared for the worst. Captain Daniel Harper stood near the main screen, his sharp eyes scanning the readings. "Keep tracking it," he ordered Ensign Jacob Riley, who was glued to his console. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." Jacob nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. The young ensign had never felt more pressure in his life, but he pushed aside his nerves and focused on the task at hand. "It's big, sir," he reported after a moment. Much larger than the drones. And it's slowing down. Slowing down? Lieutenant Emily Carter asked sharply, leaning forward in her seat. Why would it do that? No one had an answer. The unknown object continued its approach, now close enough for the ship's sensors to capture a blurry image. It was shaped like a massive sphere, covered in intricate patterns that glowed faintly. Dr. Laura Simmons studied the feed intently, her face pale. That design, she murmured. It matches the symbols from the alien ship. Captain Harper frowned. You think it's connected? It has to be, Simmons replied. This could be part of their technology, the source of the drone's programming. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle's voice crackled over the intercom. Captain, we've got a problem. The reactor core is destabilizing. If we don't fix it soon, we'll lose power to the entire ship. Harper clenched his jaw. How long do we have? 10 minutes, maybe less, Doyle answered grimly. Get your team on it, Harper ordered. Turning to Sergeant Rachel Moore, he added, we need volunteers to secure the engineering deck. Those hull breaches are making it harder to contain the damage. Moore didn't hesitate. I'm on it. She signaled to 2 Marines and rushed out of the bridge, leaving behind only the echo of her boots on the metal floor. Meanwhile, the mysterious sphere drew closer, its glowing patterns pulsing rhythmically. Jacob adjusted the sensors, trying to get a clearer picture. Sir, I'm picking up energy spikes coming from it. It's charging something. Charging what? Harper demanded, his voice tight with urgency. I don't know yet, Jacob admitted. His hands trembled slightly as he worked, sweat trickling down his temple. This wasn't just another enemy. It was something far beyond our understanding. In engineering, Kevin Doyle scrambled to stabilize the reactor core. Sparks flew around him as he and his team fought against time. The temperature in the room rose dangerously high, forcing them to work quickly. We can't hold it much longer. One of the engineers shouted, panic creeping into his voice. Doyle gritted his teeth, ignoring the chaos around him. He climbed onto a narrow platform above the core, reaching for a manual override lever. The heat scorched his skin, but he didn't stop. With a final heave, he pulled the lever, and the reactor stabilized just as the lights flickered back on. The room erupted in cheers, but Doyle collapsed to his knees, exhausted and burned but alive. Back on the bridge, the sphere finally came to a halt, hovering ominously outside the ship. Its glowing patterns brightened, bathing the invincible asterisk in an eerie light. Then, without warning, it fired a beam of energy directly at the warship. The shields absorbed most of the impact, but the force rocked the vessel violently. What was that? Emily cried, struggling to regain control of her station. Dr. Simmons stared at the screen, her mind racing. It's probing us, she said, testing our defenses. And if it finds a weakness? Harper asked darkly. Simmons didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. As the crew braced for another attack, Lieutenant Ryan Bennett stepped forward. Captain, I might have an idea, he said hesitantly. If we send someone inside the sphere, someone who can disable its core, we might be able to shut it down before it destroys us. Harper studied him carefully. Who would go? Bennett hesitated, then glanced at Sergeant Moore, who had returned to the bridge. It'll take someone fast, skilled, and willing to risk everything, he said quietly. All eyes turned to Moore, who met their gaze without flinching. I'll do it, she said firmly. But I won't go alone. She looked at Jacob, who froze in his seat. Ensign Riley comes with me. Jacob's heart skipped a beat. Me, he stammered. But I'm not. You're quick on your feet, Moore interrupted. And you've got a good head for tech. We'll need that. Harper nodded slowly. All right. Prep a shuttle. You leave in 10 minutes. As Moore and Jacob hurried to prepare, the rest of the crew watched silently, knowing this mission might be their only chance, and that it could easily cost them their lives. The shuttlecraft detached from the *US Invincible * with a soft hiss, its engines glowing faintly as it moved toward the massive sphere. Inside, Sergeant Rachel Moore sat in the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls. Behind her, Ensign Jacob Riley gripped the edge of his seat, his knuckles white. He tried to focus on the mission ahead, but his mind kept replaying the dangers they were about to face. "You okay back there?" Moore asked without looking away from the viewport. Her tone was calm, almost casual, but Jacob could hear the tension beneath her words. "I'll manage," he replied, forcing himself to sound confident. "Just don't let us crash." Moore smirked slightly. "I'll do my best." The sphere loomed larger as they approached, its glowing patterns pulsing like a heartbeat. Jacob stared at it, feeling both awe and dread. It was beautiful in a strange, alien way, but also terrifying. Every instinct told him to turn back, to run as far away as possible. But he knew they didn't have that option. "Any idea how we're getting inside?" Jacob asked, breaking the silence. Moore nodded. Lieutenant Bennett found a weak spot, a small opening near the top. "If we time it right, we can slip through before the shields close again. And if we don't time it right, we get fried," she said bluntly. "Try not to worry about it." Jacob swallowed hard but didn't respond. The shuttle shuddered as Moore adjusted their course, lining them up with the narrow gap. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. The sphere's energy field crackled around them, bright arcs of light dancing across the viewport. Then, with a sudden jolt, they were through. Inside, the sphere was even stranger than they had imagined. The walls, or what passed for walls, were made of shifting, translucent material that glowed faintly. Strange symbols floated in the air, moving like living things. The entire place felt alive, watching them with unseen eyes. "This is unsettling," Jacob muttered, stepping out of the shuttle. His boots clicked against the smooth surface beneath him, though it didn't feel solid. It was more like standing on thick glass. "Stay focused," Moore reminded him, her weapon drawn and ready. "We don't have time to gawk." Jacob nodded and pulled out a handheld scanner, trying to locate the core. The device beeped erratically, overwhelmed by the sheer amount of energy surrounding them. "It's close," he said after a moment, "but the readings are all over the place." "Just point me in the right direction," Moore replied, her voice firm. They moved cautiously through the alien structure, every step echoing unnaturally. The symbols around them shifted and changed, forming shapes that almost looked like faces. Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched and judged. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A low hum filled the air, growing louder with each passing second. "What's happening?" Jacob asked, his voice rising. "They know we're here," Moore said grimly. "Move faster." Jacob hurried forward, clutching the scanner tightly. The beeping grew steadier as they neared their target. Finally, they'd reached a large chamber at the center of the sphere. In the middle of the room floated a pulsating orb, its surface covered in intricate patterns that matched the ones from the alien ship and the drones. "That's it," Jacob whispered, pointing at the orb. "That's the core." Moore stepped closer, studying it carefully. "How do we shut it down?" Jacob hesitated, scanning the orb with his device. "There's a sequence. It looks like we need to disable these nodes one by one." He pointed to several glowing spots on the orb's surface. "If we mess up the order, it might trigger a self-destruct." "Great," Moore muttered. "Let's not mess up then." Working quickly, Jacob directed Moore to each node, guiding her movements as she used her tools to deactivate them. The orb resisted, sending out bursts of energy that forced them to duck and dodge. Sweat dripped down Jacob's face as he fought to stay focused, knowing one mistake could cost them everything. When the final node was disabled, the orb dimmed, its glow fading until it was nearly dark. The hum in the air stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. "We did it," Jacob said, letting out a shaky breath. "Not yet," Moore replied, glancing around warily. "Let's get out of here before something else happens." As they turned to leave, the walls began to shift and close in around them. The sphere wasn't done fighting yet. The walls of the sphere began to close in, twisting and folding like living things. The once stable ground beneath Sergeant Rachel Moore and Ensign Jacob Riley started to ripple, making it hard to keep their footing. Panic crept into Jacob's chest as he stumbled forward, clutching his scanner tightly. "We need to move," he shouted, his voice trembling. Moore didn't waste time responding. She grabbed Jacob's arm, pulling him toward the exit. "Stay with me," she barked, her tone sharp but steady. Her training kicked in, keeping her focused even as the alien structures seemed determined to trap them. The glowing symbols around them flickered erratically, pulsing faster and brighter. It was as if the sphere itself was angry, reacting to the core's shutdown. Jacob glanced over his shoulder, watching the walls shift closer. "It's trying to crush us," he exclaimed, his breath coming in short gasps. "Then we run faster," Moore replied, dragging him along. They reached the chamber's edge, where the path back to the shuttlecraft was already narrowing. The translucent material twisted unnaturally, forming barriers that blocked their way. Jacob stopped suddenly, staring at the obstruction. "We can't get through that." Moore scanned the area quickly, her mind racing for a solution. Spotting a faintly glowing panel on the wall, she pointed to it. "That might be a control point. If we can activate it, we might open a path." Jacob hesitated. "What if it makes things worse?" "We don't have a choice," she snapped, shoving him toward the panel. "Do your thing." He swallowed hard but stepped forward, studying the glowing surface. His fingers moved rapidly over the scanner, trying to decipher the alien interface. The symbols responded to his touch, rearranging themselves into new patterns. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a loud hum, the walls shifted again, creating a narrow tunnel ahead. "This way," Jacob called out, rushing forward. Moore followed closely behind, her weapon drawn in case anything, or anyone, appeared. The tunnel stretched endlessly, its glowing walls pulsating with an unsettling rhythm. Every step felt heavier, as if the sphere was resisting their escape. Jacob's legs burned from the effort, but he pushed himself harder, knowing they couldn't afford to slow down. Behind them, the tunnel began to collapse, chunks of alien material breaking apart and falling. "We're not going to make it," Jacob cried, glancing back at the destruction chasing them. "Yes, we are," Moore said firmly, her voice cutting through his fear. She reached out, grabbing his shoulder to steady him as he stumbled. "Keep moving." Finally, they burst into the chamber where the shuttlecraft waited. The small vessel looked impossibly fragile against the chaos surrounding it. Without hesitation, Moore leaped into the pilot's seat, while Jacob scrambled into the co-pilot's chair. "Go, go," he urged, slamming his hand on the dashboard. The engines roared to life just as the walls closed in behind them. Moore maneuvered the shuttle with precision, dodging falling debris and bursts of energy. Jacob gripped the edges of his seat, bracing himself as the craft shot forward, narrowly escaping the collapsing sphere. Outside, the massive structure trembled violently, its glow dimming further. As the shuttle sped away, the sphere imploded, collapsing into itself with a blinding flash of light. The shockwave hit the shuttle hard, sending it spinning momentarily before Moore regained control. Back aboard the US Invincible Asterisk, the crew watched anxiously as the sphere disappeared from their sensors. Captain Daniel Harper stood on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the viewport. When the shuttle finally docked safely, a wave of relief washed over everyone. Moore and Jacob stepped onto the ship, both covered in sweat and breathing heavily. "Mission accomplished," Moore reported, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. Harper nodded, his expression grim. "Good work, but we're not out of this yet." He turned to Lieutenant Emily Carter. "Prepare for another attack. Whatever's left of those drones won't stop now." As the crew returned to their stations, Jacob leaned against a nearby wall, trying to catch his breath. He had faced death head-on and survived. For the first time since joining the mission, he felt a spark of confidence. They had taken down the sphere, but he knew the fight wasn't over. The swarm was still out there, and Earth's fate rested in their hands. The *US Invincible Asterisk floated in the quiet aftermath of the sphere's destruction, its crew working feverishly to prepare for what came next. The silence outside was deceptive. Everyone knew the drones would return, angrier and more determined than before. Captain Daniel Harper stood on the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the screens as the sensors tracked the remnants of the swarm. "Status report," he ordered, his voice calm but firm. Lieutenant Emily Carter glanced up from her console. "Shields are holding steady at 70%. Weapon systems are online, but we're down 2 missile launchers. Engineering is still patching the hull breaches." Harper nodded, his jaw tightening. "And the drones?" "They're regrouping," Jacob Riley replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "They've lost their central command, but they're adapting, forming smaller clusters instead of one big swarm. That makes them harder to hit," Emily added grimly, "but also less coordinated. We might have an edge if we strike now." Harper considered this for a moment. "Set up decoy signals. Lure them into a trap." Emily raised an eyebrow. "A trap? With what?" "We'll use the damaged sections of the ship," Harper explained. "Send out false readings to make it look like our weak points are exposed. When they move in, we hit them with everything we've got." Jacob hesitated, glancing at the captain. What if they figure it out? What if they breach the hull again? "Then we'll deal with it," Harper said sharply. "We don't have time for second-guessing. Get it done." The crew sprang into action, setting up the decoys while Lieutenant Ryan Bennett worked with Dr. Laura Simmons to refine their targeting system. "If we can focus on their energy cores, we can take out entire clusters at once," Bennett suggested, pointing to a diagram on his screen. Simmons nodded. "It's risky, but it could work. Just make sure you aim carefully." Meanwhile, Sergeant Rachel Moore led her Marines through the damaged sections of the ship, reinforcing bulkheads and setting up defensive positions. "Stay sharp," she told them. "If those things get inside, we won't get another chance." As the preparations continued, the first wave of drones appeared on the sensors. They moved cautiously at first, probing the ship's defenses, but when the decoy signals went live, the drones surged forward, drawn to the false vulnerabilities like moths to a flame. "Here they come," Jacob shouted, his voice rising with urgency. The drones fired relentlessly, their energy blasts slamming into the shields. Sparks flew across the bridge as the impacts shook the ship. "Hold steady," Harper ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Wait for my signal." Emily gripped her console tightly, her eyes fixed on the drone formations. "They're clustering around the decoys. Perfect targets. Now," Harper barked. Emily didn't hesitate. She activated the ship's main weapons, unleashing a barrage of missiles and laser fire at the clustered drones. Explosions lit up the darkness outside as entire groups of attackers were obliterated. The crew cheered briefly, but the celebration was short-lived. More drones poured in, filling the void left by their destroyed comrades. "They're not stopping," Jacob cried, frantically adjusting the sensors. "There's too many of them." "Keep firing," Harper commanded. "Don't let up." The battle raged on, the Invincible Asterisk taking heavy damage as it fought to hold its ground. Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, we're losing power to the aft shields. If they break through—" "They won't," Harper interrupted firmly. "Doyle, reroute auxiliary power. We need those shields up." In engineering, Doyle and his team scrambled to comply, sweat pouring down their faces as alarms blared around them. The ship shuddered violently, throwing them off balance. "Come on, hold together," Doyle muttered under his breath. On the bridge, Emily targeted another cluster of drones, her hands moving with practiced precision. "Direct hits," she announced, allowing herself a small smile. But the swarm kept coming, relentless and unyielding. Finally, Jacob spotted something unusual on the sensors. "Sir, there's a gap in their formation. If we punch through, we can scatter them." Harper didn't hesitate. "Full throttle. Take us straight through." The invincible asterisk surged forward, its engines roaring as it plowed through the weakened section of the swarm. The drones faltered, their coordination breaking down completely. For the first time, the tide of the battle began to turn. As the last of the drones exploded into fragments of light, the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. The immediate threat was gone, but the cost had been high. Hull breaches, damaged systems, and exhausted personnel reminded them of how close they had come to failure. Captain Harper turned to his crew, his expression unreadable. "Good work," he said quietly. "But we're not done yet. Not until we're sure they're finished for good." The crew exchanged weary glances, knowing the fight wasn't truly over. But for now, they had survived. And that was enough. The US Invincible asterisk drifted slowly toward a nearby starbase, its battered hull a testament to the fierce battles it had endured. The crew worked silently, their movements heavy with exhaustion, but also a sense of accomplishment. They had survived against overwhelming odds, but the scars of the fight lingered, both on the ship and in their minds. Captain Daniel Harper stood on the bridge, staring out at the stars as the ship limped through space. His thoughts were filled with the faces of those they had lost. Chief Engineer Kevin Doyle had sacrificed himself to save the reactor core during the final assault, staying behind to ensure the ship didn't fall apart. 2 Marines had fallen defending a critical section of the hull. Each loss weighed heavily on Harper's shoulders, but he knew their sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Earth was safe, for now. Lieutenant Emily Carter sat at her station, her fingers resting lightly on the controls. She wasn't monitoring sensors or weapons anymore. There was no need. The drones were gone, scattered into fragments that would never threaten anyone again. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. "Do you think we got them all?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. Harper turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. "We destroyed the swarm and shut down the sphere. If any of them are still out there, they're too weak to pose a threat. But Dr. Simmons is right. We can't let our guard down." Dr. Laura Simmons stood near the back of the bridge, her arms crossed as she stared at the main screen. Her mind replayed the symbols from the alien ship and the sphere, the warnings etched into their designs. "This isn't over," she said finally, her voice soft but firm. "The drones were just one piece of something much bigger. Whatever created them might still exist somewhere out there." The room fell silent as her words sank in. No one wanted to believe that another threat could be waiting in the vastness of space, but they couldn't ignore the possibility either. Humanity had only scratched the surface of what lay beyond Earth's borders, and not everything out there was friendly. Ensign Jacob Riley leaned against a console, watching the others. He felt different now, changed by everything he had seen and done. When he had first boarded the Invincible asterisk, he'd been unsure of himself, doubting whether he belonged among such experienced crew members. But after facing death head-on and playing a key role in disabling the sphere, he realized he had earned his place. He straightened up, his posture more confident than before. Sergeant Rachel Moore walked onto the bridge, her boots clicking softly against the metal floor. She stopped beside Harper, her gaze steady. "Repairs are underway," she reported, "but it'll take weeks to get the ship fully operational again." Harper nodded. "We'll make do. For now, everyone deserves some rest. You've all earned it." As the crew began to disperse, Jacob hesitated, glancing at the viewport. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, beautiful and mysterious. He thought about the dangers lurking in the darkness, but also the promise of discovery. Space was vast and unpredictable, full of challenges and wonders alike. It was terrifying, yes, but also exhilarating. "You okay, Riley?" Emily asked. noticing him lingering. Jacob smiled faintly. Yeah, just thinking. About what? About how much we don't know, he admitted, and how much we still have to learn. Emily chuckled softly. Welcome to the life of a spacer. Just remember, one step at a time. As the US Invincible continued its journey, the crew reflected on what they had faced and overcome. They had fought not just for themselves, but for Earth, for the billions of people who would never know the names of those who protected them. The warship might have been damaged, but its spirit remained unbroken. And though the road ahead was uncertain, they were ready to face whatever came next. In the quiet moments between repairs and rest, Jacob gazed out at the stars once more. He didn't feel fear this time, only determination. Out here, in the endless expanse of space, humanity's story was still being written, and he was proud to be part of it.